which some of you, again, may have seen. This is my only character that actually has any 5 links. Both other 2 characters run on 4 links. So, unlike my previous 2 characters, this character is not a melee, and is a caster, and does not use Fortify. So, I'm going to show her gear and her passives again before I do a run. Alright, so this character is a caster that utilizes the skill Cold Snap. Okay, I have 2 Cold Snaps available. These things do a little bit more damage than listed here because they have some more power, but I have a single target one here, which has an average damage of over 4,000 cold damage, not before adjusting for things like hypothermia and cold pen, and an AoE one here, which has an average damage of 2,300 before adjusting for things like hypothermia, cold pen, power charges, that kind of thing. So, the gear that this character uses, that dropped from before, this character uses 3 uniques right now. I would use only 2 if I had a 5-link chest, but I don't. So, the gear I'm using, so Romira's Banquet. This item is absolutely critical for this build, because with Cold Snap, says icy crystals protrude from the ground at target location, monsters in the area take damage and become frozen, has a cooldown of 4 seconds, excuse me. But the cooling can be bypassed by expending a power charge. Now, with Romira's Banquet, we gain a power charge on non-critical strike. Therefore, we take the Resolute Technique Keystone, so we cannot crit. And thereby, whenever we hit an enemy with Cold Snap, we get a power charge to Cold Snap again, therefore we can spam it. So this is absolutely key to this build. Okay? Next, we have our Terran Shiver. Again, this is an item that dropped. I 5-linked this manually. It's kind of a min roll on the spell and cold damage, but that's okay. It's a 5-link with a +1 cold. That's just kind of the general thing I like here. Also, enemies frozen by you take 20% increased damage, which means it's easier for them to stay frozen. Also has freeze chance. So this one contains my AoE Cold Snap setup. So we have our Cold Snap, linked with Hypothermia, Spell Echo, Increased Area of Effect, and Elemental Proliferation. So basically, I pop this and it can freeze and shatter an entire pack. Okay. The cool thing here is that with Hypothermia and Spell Echo, so usually the initial hit, the initial cast will freeze them or chill them, and then the Hypothermia follow-up, they just immediately take a whole bunch more damage. The Hypothermia also synergizes with several of my other skills, which I will get to in a bit. So my helm is a Rime Gaze. Again, this is another thing that dropped from my Righteous Fire character. So the cool things with this is it contains a level 15 Conk effect and has 30% increased cold damage, which means this is a free 5-link, essentially. So here we have our 5-link single target setup with it, which is Cold Snap, linked with the Conk effect from the helm, Spell Echo, Hypothermia, I talked about this combination earlier, and also Cold Penetration. So Penetration, the way it works is that you reduce the target's resist by the amount listed here, so that in this case this is 35. And you also will ignore that much of their max resist even if they're overcapped. So for example, with 35 Cold Pen, I actually have more than this, but with 35 Cold Pen, the maximum enemy could have against me is only 40% cold resist. And if they have no cold resist, they'll have minus 35. Support skills that support my things here. I have the Curse Frostbite, which is 42% cold resistance loss, along with 13% increased freeze chance. We have Flame Dash to move around. Our Chaos Golem for increased physical damage reduction, because this character has no armor to speak of. And faster casting. I'm leveling a Hypothermia here. Okay? Because I want to be able to reset these. In my gloves, these gloves are pretty placeholder, life and resists. I could get a better pair pretty easily. This currently contains my auras. We have Clarity, Arctic Armor, and Herald of Ice. So the cool thing about Herald of Ice, we've got that damage cannot be reflected, and it also basically adds a pretty powerful pop when the enemies explode. Okay, I was considering linking this to some other things, but I haven't needed to yet, and it's really important to have as much mana as I can open with the Mind Over Matter that I use. So remember how I talked about Hypothermia synergizing with their support skills? Well, here's one of them, Arctic Armor. So if you can't physically chill a boss, or if an enemy hits you, well, Arctic Armor chills them, and it also leaves chilled ground on the ground. So if enemies are chasing you, or if they hit you, they get chilled, which enables Hypothermia to do more damage. Okay? And then in my boots, which is a pretty darn nice pair of armor evasion boots that I found recently, this contains another support skill, which is defensive. We got Arctic Breath linked with cast when damage taken, greater multiple projectiles, and increased duration. You may be thinking, why increased duration? Well, that makes the ice that's left behind by Arctic Breath last longer. So this chills enemies once again, synergizes with our hypothermia on our cold snaps, and it also, again, makes enemies chilled longer, which is nice defensively. My other gear, I have a belt with life and resistance. I have an amulet with 50 dex and life and resistance of energy shield. So this was really important because this build is really starved for dex, and if you can't get dex here, you're going to be spending a lot of passive points to get it. So you need a good piece of dex from gear, and then I have a ring here with life and resistances, some ES. Having an ES buffer is nice for this character because she, if she takes a hit, she can usually freeze lock entire packs long enough for the shields to come back online. Okay, let's go into her passive tree. Her passive tree is all about maximizing spell damage and getting some amount of cast speed along with AoE. We have some life and mana here. We go into the shadow tree for freeze chance, elemental damage, life, and some dexterity, which I mentioned is important earlier, and cast speed. Within here we have an extra power charge, spell damage per power charge, along with the entire cold damage cluster here. We have Heart of Ice, 3% elemental penetration. We also have mana and life here. Remember how I talked about my penetration value actually being higher? Well, we have 3% from over here, and we also have 2% from over here. So my penetration with a normal skill is 5%. My penetration with the penetration gem is 40%. So we have the Mind Over Matter node here. Life and regeneration, life and chaos res, cast speed and spell damage, elemental damage and freeze chance, AoE, regeneration, extra mana and reduced mana cost. These skills are very expensive. They cost 78 and 81 mana respectively right now. I'm going to be getting this node here to get more mana and reduce them even further. So that way, I get more mana and it'll help me maintain Mind Over Matter. This character currently does not use any jewels. If I got some potentially better life nodes, I could do that. But there's a lot of life nodes that are waiting to be taken, and you can see we also have Resolute Technique here, which again is really important for the combo. So we'll demonstrate this character with another Cove. I got a bunch of maps sitting around in her inventory, but that's okay. We'll run this. Lightning Res, that's fine. Frenzy Charges, again, fine. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to freeze lock this boss. This character's only level 82. I got her up recently. The last one I needed for the achievement. This character is far and away probably the most fun one I've played this league, although my other ones probably may potentially clear faster. This character is very good. So Curse and Freeze Lock. People come in on you from the side, you freeze lock them. This is my AoE setup. It can pretty much easily one-shot white packs right now. So I know it's hard to tell which skill I'm using. Because they both look the same. The boxes are pretty easy most of the time as long as they don't freeze you solid, because what you can do is you can just, as soon as you freeze lock, enemies aren't going anywhere. So we'll Curse, freeze lock, freeze lock, freeze lock. I've actually done very well in PvP with this character, just because you can freeze lock a lot of characters. You heard the mana call off go there, but that just meant that I took a pretty big hit combination. But Mind Over Mana blocked a lot of it. This character is also capable of freeze locking a lot of bosses. Like, for example, Piety and Merciless is no problem to freeze lock. I did that for someone the other day. You can freeze lock bosses that have ads, but with a properly placed Prolif Cold Snap. So most of the time I'm using the group AoE one. For example, this is a lone guy, I'm just going to single target Cold Snap him down. As you can see, it does take a little while, but I can hit a lot of enemies at a time because the AoE is so big. And the Prolif freeze effect is so powerful that it just keeps the enemies off me.
What the heck? 5. Yeah. 6. Oh my gosh.
So the maximum damage with all the charges up, 4.1k, 2.4k. So essentially we have an extra 16% spell damage from our power charges. It's not much, but it makes a difference. There's a very high health boss that we're just going to freeze lock. There's the boss. So we're going to go ahead and pro with this guy. Alright. Now we'll work on Master of the Blade exclusively, and as you can see, he's not really getting freeze locked. So I have to kite him a little bit to let my mana pool come back. Alright. As you can see, this character is nowhere near as tanky as my other ones. She has to kite a little bit on bosses, especially guys like this. He's down. Took a little longer, but that's just because I didn't have enough to freeze lock him yet. That boss in particular, the map Creighton, is not very freeze lockable. Oh, this will be a nice demo here. Alright, so we'll go ahead and activate him. Wants me to keep the target alive. That's scum. I'm just going to kill him, just as a kind of a demonstration of what this character can do in PvP. So you can see we easily freeze locked him. Kick open the chest. This character might have one of the higher. She might have the highest clear speed of all my characters, but she's definitely the least tanky. At least in terms of direct. In terms of direct physical action, she's not that tanky. What she does have going for her there, though, is she has... Again, she has the high freeze lock, she's got good regen. So in terms of her defensive stats, she has a little bit of evasion rating, not very much. Pretty much no armor. 114 life per second, 110 mana per second, with of course overcapped res, a little bit of chaos res. 18% block chance, which is inherent to our staff.
Looking for some sparring practice.
Now Leo has offered a sparring practice. So we'll see if there's enough players in there to even do anything with. Oh man. Age is full again. Okay, I'll deal with that in a bit. But let's see if I can just hopefully somewhat touch what the PvP potential of this character is. As long as there aren't super high levels waiting in the arena to wreck me. So you can see if there's anyone in the arena by control clicking the entrance. There's one person in there. Let's see if he's AFK or paying attention. Basically, if we get our first shot off, and we actually get the freeze, then this things will work pretty well. So what we want to do here, typically, is I get to max range, curse, fire at will. Let's see what that person does. Alright, we've got a walk down. Level 93 killed. Pretty darn solid.